The courtroom falls into an unusual silence as the bailiff calls the next case. Case number 2024 CR 8847. The State of Rhode Island vs. Madison Thornhill. There's a shift in the room, something different in the air. Even the court staff exchange glances. Judge Frank Caprio looks up from his papers, his reading glasses perched on his nose, and in that moment, he senses it too. This isn't going to be an ordinary hearing. A young woman steps forward. She's dressed in a navy blazer and pressed slacks, her blonde hair pulled back neatly. She looks composed, almost defiant, her chin held high as she approaches the bench. But there's something in her eyes, a flicker of vulnerability beneath the polished exterior. Behind her, a man in a wheelchair rolls forward slowly. He's in his 60s, wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap, his weathered hands gripping the wheels with practiced strength. His face tells 1,000 stories, most of them written in lines of pain and perseverance. Judge Caprio removes his glasses and sets them down gently. He's seen countless cases in this courtroom, heard every excuse, witnessed every shade of human struggle and failing. But this particular combination, the young woman's air of privilege, the veteran's quiet dignity, the charge on the paper before him, it gives him pause. He reads the summary again, his brow furrowing slightly. Assault and battery. Destruction of property. The defendant, Madison Thornhill, age 26, daughter of Police Chief Robert Thornhill. The judge looks up at the young woman, then at the veteran, then back at his papers. When he speaks, his voice carries that familiar warmth, but there's steel underneath. Miss Thornhill, he begins, leaning back in his chair, I've been on this bench for a long time. I've seen a lot of things. But I have to tell you, when I read this case file this morning, I had to read it twice. So before we go any further, I want you to tell me something. I want you to tell me what happened. Not what your lawyer wrote down, not what the police report says. I want to hear from you. In your own words. What happened that day? Madison shifts her weight. For a moment, the confidence wavers. Her attorney, a well-dressed man in an expensive suit, starts to rise, but Caprio raises a hand. Counselor, sit down. I'm talking to your client. He turns back to Madison, his expression softening just slightly. I'm not trying to trap you. I'm not trying to trick you. But I need to understand. This gentleman here, he gestures toward the veteran, is Dennis Crawford. He's 63 years old. He served our country in Vietnam. He lost the use of his legs in combat. And according to this complaint, on the afternoon of September 14th, you struck him multiple times, knocked him out of his wheelchair, and damaged his vehicle. So I need you to help me understand how something like that happens. The courtroom is absolutely still. Even the usual shuffling of papers has stopped. Madison's eyes glisten, but she blinks rapidly, trying to maintain control. Your Honor, it wasn't. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Her voice is quieter than expected, softer. I was having a really bad day. I had just gotten some news, and I wasn't thinking clearly, and he was parked in my spot. Judge Caprio leans forward now, his elbows on the bench, his hands clasped. Your spot? There's no judgment in his tone, just curiosity. Tell me about this spot. The handicapped space, Madison says. Outside my apartment building. I always park there because it's closest to the door, and I was in a hurry, and when I pulled up, he was there. And I lost it. The judge is very still now, processing this. He looks at Dennis Crawford, who sits quietly in his wheelchair, his face unreadable. Then back at Madison. You lost it because a disabled veteran was parked in a handicapped spot? The spot designated for people exactly like him? His voice remains gentle, but the weight of the question hangs in the air like fog. Madison's composure cracks. I know how it sounds. I know. But you don't understand. I am going through something. And I just needed to get inside. And when I asked him to move, he told me he had every right to be there, and I just snapped. I started yelling, and then I grabbed his wheelchair, and he tried to stop me, and I pushed him, and he fell out, and I just kept going. I wasn't thinking. I was just so angry. Judge Caprio sits back slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. Around the courtroom, people are shifting in their seats. The prosecutor, a young woman with a thick file in front of her, looks ready to pounce. But Caprio raises his hand again, a gesture everyone in this courtroom knows means wait, let me work. What kind of news did you get that day? He asks quietly. What made you so angry that you would hurt an innocent man? Madison's attorney stands again. Your Honor, I don't think my client's personal situation is. Sit down, Caprio says, more firmly this time. I'm going to find out what I need to find out. Miss Thornhill, I asked you a question. What happened that made you do this? Because I've been doing this job long enough to know that people don't just attack disabled veterans for no reason. Even people who make terrible decisions usually have a reason. So what was yours? There's a long pause. Madison's hands are trembling now. She clasps them together, trying to steady herself. When she speaks, her voice is barely above a whisper. I found out that morning that my mother has stage 4 cancer. Pancreatic. They gave her 3 to 6 months. The words come out in a rush, and the moment they're spoken, something shifts in the room. I had just left the hospital. I was trying to get home. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. And then this stranger was in my way, and I exploded. Judge Caprio closes his eyes for a moment. When he opens them, they're soft with understanding, but his expression remains serious. I'm sorry to hear about your mother. I truly am. That's devastating news, and I can't imagine what you must have been feeling. He pauses, letting that sink in. But Miss Thornhill, your pain doesn't give you the right to hurt someone else. You understand that, don't you? She nods, tears finally spilling over. I know. I know, and I'm so sorry. I've been sorry every single day since it happened. Have you apologized to Mr. Crawford? Caprio asks, turning slightly toward the veteran. Madison looks at Dennis for the first time since entering the courtroom. I tried. I sent a letter. I called. But he wouldn't. I understand why he wouldn't respond. What I did was unforgivable. Judge Caprio turns to the veteran. Mr. Crawford, I want to hear from you. What do you want to tell me about what happened that day? Dennis Crawford takes a deep breath. His hands, scarred and weathered, grip the armrests of his wheelchair. When he speaks, his voice is steady, but there's an edge of pain that goes deeper than the physical. Your Honor, with all due respect, I've heard a lot of excuses in my life. When you've been where I've been, you learn to see through most of the nonsense people try to feed you. That young lady attacked me. Not just verbally, physically. She yanked on my chair so hard I thought it would tip. When I tried to explain that I was legally parked, that I had every right to be in that space, she screamed in my face. Called me names I won't repeat in this courtroom. And when I reached for my phone to call the police, she slapped it out of my hand, grabbed the handles of my chair, and shoved me backward. I fell out. Landed on the concrete. Broke my wrist. Cracked 2 ribs. And while I was lying there, she kicked my wheelchair into my van, left a huge dent in the side panel, and drove off. The courtroom reacts with audible gasps. Madison is openly crying now, her hands covering her face. Even her attorney looks disturbed by the description. Judge Caprio's expression darkens, but he keeps his voice measured. Mr. Crawford, were you injured beyond the wrist and ribs? Bruised spine, Dennis says. Had to spend 3 days in the hospital. Missed 2 weeks of work because I couldn't move without pain. Still have trouble sometimes. He pauses, his jaw tightening. But the physical stuff that heals eventually. It's the other part that stays with you. The humiliation. Lying on the ground, helpless, while people walked by and did nothing. Watching her drive away like I was nothing. Like I wasn't even human. Judge Caprio nods slowly, absorbing every word. He looks at Madison, whose head is bowed. Miss Thornhill, do you dispute anything Mr. Crawford just said? She shakes her head without looking up. No, Your Honor. It's all true. Every word. The judge leans back, rubbing his temple. You know, I've sat on this bench for decades. I've seen people at their worst, drunk drivers who've killed families, thieves who've stolen from the elderly, abusers who've hurt children. And you know what the difference is between most of those people and you? Most of them try to lie. They make excuses. They minimize. You, at least, are owning what you did. That tells me something. It tells me there might be a person of character underneath this terrible mistake. But I need to understand more. I need to know who you are. Because right now, all I see is a young woman from a privileged background who hurt a vulnerable man and left him on the ground. So talk to me. Tell me about your life. Help me see the person behind this action. Madison wipes her eyes with the back of her hand. Her attorney hands her a tissue, and she takes a moment to compose herself before speaking. Your Honor, I grew up here in Providence. My father is Police Chief Thornhill, everyone knows that. And I know what people think. They think I had everything handed to me. And maybe in some ways, I did. We had a nice house. I went to good schools. I never worried about money. But my father. He worked all the time. 60, 70 hours a week. My mother raised me and my younger brother mostly by herself. She was the heart of our family. She was the one who showed up to every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. She was everything. She pauses, her voice catching. When I was 16, my father was almost killed in the line of duty. He was responding to a domestic violence call, and the suspect shot him twice in the chest. He survived because of his vest, but he was in the hospital for weeks. My mother never left his side. She slept in a chair next to his bed. She held our family together while he recovered. And I watched her do it all without complaining, without falling apart. She taught me what strength looked like. Judge Caprio listens intently, his expression thoughtful. And now she's the one who's sick. Yes, Madison whispers. And I don't know how to be strong like her. I don't know how to hold it together. That morning, when the doctor told us the diagnosis, I watched my father, this man who's faced down armed criminals, who's dealt with the worst humanity has to offer. I watched him completely break down. He sobbed in that hospital hallway like a child. And my mother was comforting him. Even though she's the one who's dying, she was comforting us. And I couldn't handle it. I had to get out of there. I got in my car, and I just drove. I wasn't even really seeing the road. I was on autopilot. And when I got to my apartment and that parking spot was taken, it was like everything I'd been holding in just erupted. The judge is quiet for a moment, his eyes moving between Madison and Dennis. Mr. Crawford, I want you to hear something. What happened to you was inexcusable. There's no justification for it. But I also want you to understand that this young woman was in crisis. That doesn't make what she did right, but it gives us context. Context matters in this courtroom. It always has. He turns back to Madison. What do you do for work? I'm a social worker, Madison says, and there's a ripple of surprise through the courtroom. I work with at-risk youth in South Providence. Kids who've been through trauma, abuse, neglect. I help them navigate the system, find resources, get counseling. It's what I've done for the past 4 years. Judge Caprio raises his eyebrows. A social worker. Someone whose job is to help vulnerable people. And yet on that day, you hurt one of the most vulnerable members of our community, a disabled veteran. Do you see the irony there? Every single day, Madison says, her voice breaking. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times. I've asked myself how I could do something so cruel, so opposite to everything I believe in. And the only answer I have is that I was drowning. I was in so much pain that I couldn't see past it. I couldn't see him as a person. I could only see an obstacle. And I'm so ashamed of that. The prosecutor stands. Your Honor, if I may. While Miss Thornhill's personal circumstances are certainly unfortunate, they don't change the severity of what occurred. Mr. Crawford could have been killed. He's a 70% disabled veteran living on a fixed income. The medical bills from this incident have devastated him financially. The damage to his van, his only means of transportation, cost over $3,000 to repair. And beyond the physical and financial harm, there's the psychological impact. Mr. Crawford has told our office that he now experiences anxiety attacks when he's out in public. He's afraid to park in handicapped spaces because he's worried something like this will happen again. This assault didn't just hurt him in the moment, it changed his life. And I don't believe that a tragic family situation excuses what amounts to a violent attack on a disabled veteran. Judge Caprio nods slowly. You're right. It doesn't excuse it. But I'm not looking for excuses. I'm looking for understanding. There's a difference. He turns to Dennis. Mr. Crawford, help me understand your life. What do you do? How do you get by? Dennis adjusts his position in the wheelchair, wincing slightly. I work part-time at the VA hospital. I counsel other veterans dealing with PTSD, physical disabilities, reintegration issues. It doesn't pay much, but it keeps me connected to my community. Keeps me feeling useful. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Cranston. I get by on my disability pension and the small salary from the VA. It's not much, but it's enough. Or it was, until this happened. Tell me about Vietnam, Caprio says softly. If you're comfortable sharing. Dennis's eyes go distant, traveling back decades. I was drafted in 1970. 19 years old. I thought I was invincible. We all did. I spent 13 months in the jungle near the Cambodian border. Saw things no teenager should see. Lost friends. Lost pieces of myself. On my last patrol, we hit a landmine. 3 men died instantly. I was thrown 20 feet. Woke up in a field hospital 3 days later. The doctors told me I'd never walk again. That was 54 years ago, and they were right. But I'm still here. I survived. I came home. I built a life. And I've tried every day since then to be of service, to help others who've been through trauma. Because if my suffering can ease someone else's burden, then maybe it meant something. Judge Caprio removes his glasses and sets them on the bench. He pinches the bridge of his nose, a gesture those who know him recognize as the moment when a case has truly gotten under his skin. When he looks up, his eyes are moist. Mr. Crawford, you served your country. You sacrificed your ability to walk. You've spent the last half-century trying to help others. And someone attacked you while you were legally parked in a space designated for you. How does that make you feel? Dennis's jaw works for a moment before he speaks. Angry. Scared. Small. I've dealt with a lot in my life, Your Honor. Physical pain, emotional trauma, the challenges of navigating a world that isn't built for people like me. But I've always maintained my dignity. Always. Until that day. That day, I felt like I was back in that jungle hospital, helpless and broken. It brought back feelings I'd worked decades to overcome. And the worst part? She just left me there. Drove away like I was garbage on the side of the road. Madison is sobbing openly now, her shoulders shaking. Her attorney puts a hand on her arm, but she pulls away, turning to face Dennis directly. Mr. Crawford, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I need you to hear this. What I did to you is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. Not just because of the physical harm, but because of what I took from you that day. Your dignity. Your sense of safety. I robbed you of those things, and I can never give them back. If I could take it back, if I could trade places with you, if I could do anything to undo it, I would. But I can't. All I can do is stand here and tell you that I see you now. I see who you are: a hero, a survivor, a man who's given everything to this country and continues to give to others. And I'm so deeply sorry for what I did to you. No. Dennis pulls a folded piece of paper from his pocket. I kept it. Read it every day. Because I needed to decide something. I needed to decide if I was going to let what you did turn me into a bitter, angry man, or if I was going to find a way to forgive you. And I'll be honest, it's been a battle. Some days I wanted to see you punished. Wanted you to feel even a fraction of what I felt lying on that concrete. But other days, I read your words and I saw a young woman in pain. I saw someone who made a terrible mistake in a moment of crisis. And I had to ask myself, what would holding on to this anger do for me? Would it heal my ribs faster? Would it erase the memory? No. It would just poison me from the inside. Judge Caprio leans forward intently. Mr. Crawford, what are you saying? Dennis looks at the judge, then back at Madison. I'm saying I don't know if I can forgive her yet. But I'm trying. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We try. We reach for grace even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The veterans I counsel at the VA, they've all done things they regret. They've all hurt people, made mistakes, been broken by circumstances beyond their control. And my job is to help them find their way back to themselves. To show them that one terrible moment doesn't define their entire life. So how can I demand punishment for her without being a hypocrite? The courtroom is absolutely silent. Even the prosecutor has put down her pen. Judge Caprio's face is a mixture of surprise and profound respect. Mr. Crawford, that's remarkable. But I want to be very clear. This court doesn't expect you to forgive anyone. You're the victim here. You have every right to want justice, to want consequences for what happened to you. No one would blame you for that. I know, Dennis says quietly. And there's a part of me that does want that. But there's another part, the part that spent 50 years learning to live with pain, to find purpose in suffering. That part wants something different. That part wants to break the cycle. Pain creates pain. Anger creates anger. Someone has to be brave enough to stop it. Maybe that someone is me. Madison drops to her knees in front of Dennis's wheelchair. Her attorney tries to pull her back, but she resists. Mr. Crawford, you are the most extraordinary person I've ever met. I don't deserve your grace. I don't deserve your consideration. But I swear to you, if you give me the chance, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it. I will volunteer at the VA. I will advocate for veterans' rights. I will become the kind of person who honors what you've given to this world instead of taking from it. Please. Please give me that chance. Judge Caprio stands, something he rarely does during a hearing. He comes around from behind the bench and approaches the two of them. Both of you, listen to me. What's happening here right now is what I wish happened more often in this courtroom. Real accountability. Real remorse. Real compassion. Miss Thornhill, you made a terrible mistake. You hurt someone who didn't deserve it. But you're owning it completely. Mr. Crawford, you've been victimized, but instead of demanding vengeance, you're reaching for something higher. This is what restorative justice looks like. This is what healing looks like. He helps Madison to her feet and then looks between them. I want to tell you both something. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. I've lived a long life, and I've learned that people are capable of both great cruelty and great kindness, sometimes within the same day. The measure of our character isn't whether we make mistakes, we all do. It's what we do after. How we respond. Whether we learn. Whether we grow. And I'm seeing that potential in both of you right now. The prosecutor stands again, clearly uncomfortable. Your Honor, I have to object. This is highly irregular. The defendant assaulted a disabled veteran. There are mandatory minimums for this kind of offense, especially given the hate crime enhancement. Hate crime? Caprio turns sharply. What hate crime enhancement? The prosecutor flips through her file. The statute allows for enhanced penalties when the victim is targeted due to their disability status. Given that Ms. Thornhill specifically confronted Mr. Crawford about parking in a handicapped space and then assaulted him, the state believes this qualifies. Madison's face goes white. Her attorney stands quickly. Your Honor, that's a gross mischaracterization. My client didn't target Mr. Crawford because of his disability. She was in crisis and reacted poorly to a parking situation. There was no discriminatory intent. Judge Caprio holds up his hand. Everyone sit down. I'll decide what charges apply here. He looks at the prosecutor. You really want to argue that a woman in the midst of a personal crisis, who made a terrible split-second decision, is guilty of a hate crime? You want to put that label on her for the rest of her life? The law is the law, Your Honor, the prosecutor says, but there's less conviction in her voice now. The law, Caprio says slowly, is a tool we use to achieve justice. Not a weapon we use to destroy people. There's a difference. He turns to Madison. Miss Thornhill, I need you to answer this question honestly. When you attacked Mr. Crawford, were you thinking about his disability? Were you angry at him because he was in a wheelchair? Madison shakes her head emphatically. No. God, no. I was angry that someone was in the spot I wanted. I didn't. I wasn't thinking at all. I certainly wasn't thinking about his disability as a reason to hurt him. If anything, that makes what I did even worse. I should have had more compassion, more awareness. But it wasn't hate. It was pain. Misdirected, destructive pain. Judge Caprio nods slowly. I believe you. And I'm not going to allow a hate crime enhancement here. What happened was assault. It was wrong. It caused real harm. But it wasn't motivated by hatred of disabled people, and I won't let the law be twisted to suggest otherwise. He looks at Dennis. Mr. Crawford, do you believe she targeted you because of your disability? Dennis considers this carefully. No, Your Honor. I think she would have attacked whoever was in that spot that day. I just happened to be the unlucky person who was there. It doesn't make it better, but I don't think it was about me being disabled. Judge Caprio returns to the bench but doesn't sit. He stands there, hands gripping the edge, looking down at his notes. The courtroom waits. Finally, he speaks. I want to share something with you all. My father came to this country from Italy with nothing. He worked as a laborer, broke his back to give his children opportunities he never had. He taught me that everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves a chance. And he also taught me that mercy isn't weakness, it's strength. It takes courage to forgive. It takes wisdom to see beyond someone's worst moment and recognize their humanity. He pauses, looking at Madison. Miss Thornhill, your father is Police Chief Thornhill. I've known Robert for 20 years. He's a good man. A tough man, but fair. And I can only imagine what this situation has done to him. To have his daughter facing criminal charges, to have his wife battling cancer, I'm sure he feels like his world is falling apart. Am I right? Madison nods, tears streaming down her face. He's devastated. He wanted to come today, but he couldn't face it. He's at the hospital with my mom. She's having a bad day. And I know he's ashamed of me. He hasn't said it, but I can see it in his eyes. Has he visited you since your arrest? Caprio asks. Once, Madison whispers. He came to my apartment 2 weeks ago. He sat on my couch and didn't say anything for almost an hour. Just sat there. Finally, he told me that in his 30 years as a police officer, he's arrested hundreds of people. Some of them were monsters. Some were just people who made bad choices. And he never thought his own daughter would be one of them. Then he left. Judge Caprio's expression softens with deep sadness. And your mother? Does she know about this? Yes, Madison says. I went to see her in the hospital last week. I told her everything. And you know what she said? Her voice breaks. She said she forgave me. She said everyone makes mistakes, and what matters is how we make it right. Even dying of cancer, thinking about her own mortality, she found the strength to forgive me. I don't know how she does it. The judge closes his eyes briefly, and when he opens them, they're red-rimmed. He looks at Dennis. Mr. Crawford, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. If I were to sentence Ms. Thornhill to the maximum penalty 2 years in prison, substantial fines, a permanent criminal record, would that give you peace? Would that heal what was broken that day? Dennis is quiet for a long moment. The courtroom waits. Finally, he speaks. Your Honor, I've seen enough violence in my life. I've seen what vengeance does. It doesn't heal anything. It just creates more pain, more brokenness. If you send that young woman to prison, what good does it do? Her mother is dying. She'll miss those final months. Her father is suffering. This will destroy him. And for what? To make an example? To satisfy some notion of retribution? I didn't serve my country and sacrifice my legs so we could build a system that crushes people when they're already down. The prosecutor stands, her frustration evident. Your Honor, with all due respect to Mr. Crawford's compassion, this court has a responsibility to uphold the law. Ms. Thornhill committed a serious violent offense. She has shown a capacity for violence that. She showed a capacity for human frailty, Caprio interrupts, his voice firm but not unkind. She showed that when we're in unbearable pain, we sometimes lash out in ways we never thought possible. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it understandable. And in this courtroom, understanding matters. He looks at Madison's attorney. Counsel, what was your client's record before this incident? The attorney stands. Clean, Your Honor. Not even a parking ticket. Ms. Thornhill has been a model citizen. She's employed, she pays her taxes, she volunteers in the community. This is completely out of character. And after the incident? Has she violated her bail conditions? No, Your Honor. She's complied fully. She's attended all court dates, submitted to drug testing, completed the required anger management courses. Her counselor submitted a letter saying she's been extremely engaged in the process, very remorseful, and has shown significant insight into her behavior. Judge Caprio nods. He picks up a document from his desk. I have that letter here. I also have letters from 3 of her colleagues at the social services agency where she works. They all say the same thing, that she's dedicated, compassionate, effective in her work with troubled youth. One of them writes, Madison has helped dozens of young people turn their lives around. She sees the potential in kids that everyone else has given up on. She believes in second chances. He looks up at Madison. Ironic, isn't it? You believe in second chances for others. The question is whether you believe you deserve one for yourself. I don't know if I deserve it, Madison says quietly. But I want the chance to earn it. The judge sets down the letter. Mr. Crawford, I want to ask you something else. If I were to impose a sentence that focused on restitution and rehabilitation rather than incarceration, would you support that? Dennis looks at Madison, then back at the judge. Your Honor, I just want two things. I want her to understand what she took from me, not just the physical injuries, but the sense of safety, the dignity. And I want to know that she'll never do something like this again. If you think a sentence other than prison can accomplish those things, then yes, I'd support it. Judge Caprio nods slowly. He's quiet for a long moment, his hand resting on the gavel. When he speaks, his voice is heavy with emotion. I've been a judge for a very long time. I've sentenced people to prison. I've taken parents away from children, breadwinners away from families. And every time I do it, a piece of my heart breaks. Because I know that punishment alone doesn't heal. It doesn't make victims whole. It doesn't stop the cycle of pain. What heals is accountability, remorse, change. And I see all of those things here today. He looks directly at Madison. Miss Thornhill, what you did was inexcusable. You attacked a disabled veteran. You left him injured on the ground. You caused him physical, financial, and emotional harm. Under the law, I could send you to prison for 2 years. I could fine you tens of thousands of dollars. I could ensure that this follows you for the rest of your life. But I'm not going to do that. Do you know why? Madison shakes her head, unable to speak. Because I believe in redemption, Caprio says. I believe that people can change. I believe that one terrible moment doesn't define a lifetime. And I believe that Mr. Crawford's extraordinary act of grace deserves to be honored, not ignored. However, his voice becomes stern, you need to understand something. This is not mercy without conditions. This is not a free pass. I'm about to give you an opportunity that most people in your position never get. And if you squander it, if you take it for granted, you will regret it. Do you understand me? Yes, Your Honor, Madison whispers. Judge Caprio takes a deep breath and begins. Miss Thornhill, I'm sentencing you to 5 years of probation. During that time, you will comply with the following conditions. First, you will complete 500 hours of community service, all of it to be performed at the Veterans Affairs Hospital, working directly with disabled veterans under Mr. Crawford's supervision, if he's willing to accept that responsibility. Dennis nods slowly. I am, Your Honor. Second, Caprio continues, you will make full restitution to Mr. Crawford for all medical expenses, lost wages, and property damage. I'm ordering you to pay him $17,000 within the next 2 years. You'll work out a payment plan with the probation department. Third, you will continue with counseling, not just anger management, but trauma counseling to help you deal with your mother's illness in healthier ways. Fourth, you will write a letter of apology to Mr. Crawford every month for the next year. Not a generic apology, a real letter, detailing what you've learned, how you're growing, what you're doing to make amends. And he will have the right to share those letters with me if he feels you're not taking this seriously. Madison nods, wiping her eyes. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm not finished, Caprio says. Fifth, and this is the most important condition, you will create and implement a community program focused on conflict resolution and emotional crisis management. You're a social worker. You understand trauma. You understand how pain can make people act in ways they never thought possible. I want you to take that understanding and build something that helps others. I want you to teach workshops, create resources, reach people who are on the edge before they do something they can't take back. Because Miss Thornhill, the best way to honor Mr. Crawford's mercy is to prevent what happened to him from happening to someone else. Do you understand? I do, Your Honor, Madison says, her voice stronger now. I absolutely do. I'll start working on it immediately. Judge Caprio looks at Dennis. Mr. Crawford, are you comfortable with this sentence? You have every right to object. This is your life, your pain. No one can tell you what justice should look like for you. Dennis is quiet for a moment. Then he wheels forward slightly. Your Honor, I spent years in therapy after Vietnam learning to live with what happened to me. Physical therapy to learn how to navigate the world from a wheelchair. Psychological therapy to deal with the trauma, the loss, the grief. And the most important thing I learned is this: holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It destroys you from the inside. What happened to me that day was terrible. But I'm still here. I'm still alive. I still have purpose. And if I let what she did turn me into someone bitter and vengeful, then she wins. She takes even more from me. I won't give her that power. He turns to Madison. You're going to work with me at the VA. You're going to see what I do every day. You're going to meet veterans who've lost limbs, lost their minds, lost their families. And you're going to help them. Not because a judge ordered you to, but because you genuinely want to make a difference. And maybe, through that process, you'll heal too. Maybe we both will. Madison kneels beside his wheelchair again. Mr. Crawford, I promise you. I will not waste this chance. I will honor your mercy every single day for the rest of my life. He looks at Madison. Your mother is dying. I'm deeply sorry for that. But I want you to think about something. When she passes, and I pray it's much later than the doctors predict when she passes, what legacy will you carry forward? Will you carry forward the pain and anger that led you to hurt Mr. Crawford? Or will you carry forward the grace and forgiveness he's shown you? That's the choice you have to make every day. And that choice will determine not just your future, but the kind of person you become. He turns to Dennis. Mr. Crawford, you served your country. You gave your legs in a jungle halfway around the world. You came home to a nation that didn't always appreciate your sacrifice. You've spent decades helping other veterans heal. And today, you've done something even more profound. You've shown that mercy is stronger than vengeance. That grace can break the cycle of pain. You, sir, are a true hero. Not because of what you did in Vietnam, but because of what you've done in this courtroom. Dennis's eyes well up. Thank you, Your Honor. That means more than you know. Judge Caprio places a hand on Madison's shoulder and a hand on Dennis's shoulder. I want you both to know something. This case will stay with me. It will remind me why I do this job. Not to punish people, but to help them find their way back to themselves. Not to perpetuate cycles of harm, but to break them. You've both taught me something today, and I'm grateful for it. He returns to the bench and picks up his gavel. Miss Thornhill, I'm going to enter this sentence on the record. But before I do, I want to say one more thing. Your father, Chief Thornhill, is a man I deeply respect. He's dedicated his life to protecting this community. And I know this situation has caused him tremendous pain. When you see him, I want you to tell him something from me. Tell him that his daughter made a terrible mistake, but that she has the opportunity to turn it into something meaningful. Tell him that she's not defined by her worst moment. Tell him that I believe in her. And tell him that he should be proud of the woman she's going to become. Madison is crying again, but there's something different in her expression now, hope mixed with the grief. I will, Your Honor. Thank you. Thank you for believing in me. Judge Caprio brings the gavel down gently. Case number 2024 CR 8847 is concluded. Ms. Thornhill, you will report to the probation department within 48 hours to begin your sentence. Mr. Crawford, the court thanks you for your service to this country and for your extraordinary compassion today. This hearing is adjourned. But he doesn't leave the bench immediately. He watches as Madison turns to Dennis and takes his hand. He watches as they speak quietly to each other, as something that looks like the beginning of understanding passes between them. He watches as Madison's attorney puts a hand on her back, offering support. He watches as the prosecutor, despite her earlier objections, approaches Dennis and shakes his hand with genuine respect. The courtroom slowly empties, but Judge Caprio remains. He's thinking about his own father, about the lessons of mercy and dignity he learned as a child. He's thinking about the thousands of people who've stood before this bench, all of them carrying burdens he could only glimpse. He's thinking about the difference between justice and vengeance, between punishment and healing. Finally, he stands and removes his robe. His clerk approaches. "That was something special, Judge." Caprio nods. "That's why we do this. For moments like that. When two people find a way to see each other's humanity despite everything. When grace wins." As he walks toward his chambers, he pauses at the doorway and looks back at the empty courtroom. He thinks about Madison, about the long road ahead of her. He thinks about Dennis, about the strength it took to offer forgiveness. And he thinks about all the people watching these proceedings, wondering if mercy is weakness, if compassion is foolish. To all of them, he would say this: the law is important. Justice is important. But what's most important is remembering that we're all human. We all suffer. We all make mistakes. We all need grace. And when we can offer that grace to each other, even in our darkest moments, we create something more powerful than any punishment. We create the possibility of redemption. We create the possibility of healing. We create the possibility of becoming better than we were. That young woman attacked a disabled veteran. That's a fact. But it's not the whole story. The whole story includes her pain, her remorse, her willingness to change. The whole story includes his sacrifice, his wisdom, his mercy. The whole story includes the possibility that something good can come from something terrible. And that, Judge Frank Caprio believes, is what justice really looks like. Not a system that crushes people when they're down, but a system that lifts them up and shows them the way forward. That's the legacy he wants to leave. That's the legacy we all should strive for. Because in the end, we're all just trying to find our way through this difficult, beautiful, heartbreaking life. And we need each other's mercy to make it through.